What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we have what is possibly our most anticipated video of the offseason. We're going to break down not only my favorite draft strategy, but what I believe is the strongest strategy for this season in Hero RB. We're going to break down everything I know, when, where, and how to use it, and then go over 3 different mock drafts from 3 different spots in the draft of me deploying Hero RB. Let's not waste any time. If you enjoyed the video at any point, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
So what is Hero RB? And Hero RB is a draft strategy where we take one stab at running back in rounds 1 and 2, and then we skip out on drafting our RB2 until after the running back dead zone from rounds 3 through 6. So I would give it the official definition of drafting your RB1 in rounds 1 or 2, and then waiting to draft your RB2 until after round 6. Now let's break down each component of this. Why do we want to take a running back in the first 2 rounds, and why only one? And then why do we want to wait on RB2 until after round 6? When we talk about round 1 and 2 running backs, these running backs give us access to a ceiling no other position can replicate. Pat Crane had a great article last year where he coined these league-winning running backs as running backs with legendary upside of a 20% or better win rate. Average win rate is 8.3%, so 1 divided by 12. 20% is a massive value above replacement on the average pick. And when we look at players drafted in the first 2 rounds to exceed a 20% win rate since 2015, we are looking at 9 players. We have McCaffrey twice, we have Gurley, David Johnson, Travis Kelce, Le'Veon Bell, Alvin Kamara, Julio Jones, and Antonio Brown. 6 of these players are running backs, 2 of them are wide receivers, 1 is a tight end. And the only players on this list to surpass a 25% win rate are 4 running backs, McCaffrey twice, Gurley, David Johnson. So we can see running backs have more legendary seasons than wide receivers and offer the most upside, and that's what we're gunning for. When you draft a legendary running back, you take your implied odds of winning your championship from 1 out of 12 to 1 out of 5. This then brings us to our next question of why only 1 running back in the first 2 rounds. We just saw the legendary running back table. Why wouldn't we want 2 bullets in our chamber to hit on that legendary upside? And the first thing is that would be considered double Hero RB, taking 2 running backs up top. We already made a video on that. I'll make sure to link it somewhere up here. But the reason Hero RB only warrants a single running back in the first 2 rounds is because of the immense risk you're taking on by drafting 2 early round running backs, along with not wanting to give up too much ground at wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback. And this was shown in Pat Crane's article, where when we look at the bust rate of wide receivers and running backs in the first 2 rounds, running backs are busting over 40% of the time in round 1 and about 36% of the time in round 2. Historically speaking, wide receivers have fared much better in round 1, only busting about 25% of the time, but they close the gap in round 2, not providing much more safety. So if you want to reverse engineer things here and say Hero RB is better deployed wide receiver running back than it is running back wide receiver, that's completely fine. I still will say that Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey are great Hero RB targets, but I think something like a Jefferson and a Kupp paired with Swift or Saquon is a really strong start as well. It's also worth noting that there's no such thing as floor when it comes to your Hero RB. As we can see here, running backs in the first 2 rounds are busting at a really high rate, which means the only reason to take on that risk of a running back in the first 2 rounds is to swing and just absolutely hack at a legendary running back. If your running back that you're making your Hero RB doesn't have access to a legendary upside season, you probably shouldn't take him in the first 2 rounds. This then brings us to our next question of why do we want to wait on RB2 until after round 6? And we discussed, why do we want to take that one stab at running back in the top 2 rounds? But the idea of waiting until round 7 to take that second running back is because of the running back dead zone. And we spend a lot of time this offseason talking about the RB dead zone, but this is going to be one of the last times we talk about it. We're going to be shifting away from strategy here very soon. And when we look at the running back dead zone, it's a spot in drafts in rounds 3 through 6 where running backs are propped up on fragile projected volume. Think Mike Davis on the Falcons last year, Le'Veon Bell on my Jets, Alex Collins, Thomas Rawls is a classic one, Isaiah Crowell on the Browns is another one. All of those guys that are fool's gold at running back, and generally in this area, we want to be fading running backs and hammering wide receivers. If we look at this positional heat map from last year on Underdog, we see that running backs taken in the first 2 rounds return positive advancement rates, the green areas. Then it was a sea of red from rounds 3 through 7, where it was a net negative to take running backs in that area. And then afterwards, rounds 8 and on, it was then good to go to draft running backs again. Now, as much as the dead zone is filled with running backs that hurt your teams, it's also an opportunity equation. It's not as simple as the running backs in this section hurt your team, but it's also the opposite side of that, where the wide receivers that go in rounds 3 through 6 are the ones that are smashing year in and year out. This is the area that guys like Calvin Ridley and Chris Godwin were going in their year 3 breakout seasons. Last year, you had Cooper Kupp go in that area. Jamar Chase went in that area. Deebo Samuel went at the back end of that area. And when you hammer out dead zone running backs, you're not only making a bad bet, but you're cutting yourself off from that upside at wide receiver. And this is pretty clear when we look at FFPC data from 2017 to 2021, and we can see wide receivers are smashing running backs in that rounds 3 through 6 area. Tried to, eyeball that area, and rounds 3 would be like pick 25 to like 72-ish. But you can see the way that blue line curves up, you have the biggest gap between wide receiver scoring and running back scoring in that dead zone area. We want to be hammering wide receivers in that range. So now we know we want 1 running back through 2 rounds, our RB2 in round 7 or later, but what should we be doing with the rest of the team? And I think that those 2 guidelines are good enough to win leagues and dominate your home leagues, but I push it a step further personally into the 0 RB direction to make sure I'm dominating the flex with wide receiver firepower. And we can see what I'm talking about here when we look at RotoViz's Win the Flex tool that shows what each position is projected to score based on their ADP. And this is in half PPR to show that wide receivers smash running backs even in that format. Now, we can see running backs are projected to outscore wide receivers at the elite end, right? There's no way to replicate the Christian McCaffreys of the world, the Jonathan Taylors, the Austin Ecklers. But after those first 10 to 15 picks, they converge, and wide receiver is projected to outscore running backs the rest of the way. So with that in mind, we want our flex position, which is obviously drafted outside the first 10 to 15 picks in that round 5 to 8 area. We want those to be wide receivers because they're projected to outscore running backs across the board. So how do we make sure that we're always winning the flex with dominant wide receiver production? And the answer is pretty simple. We draft more wide receivers than we need. And a good rule of thumb for me personally is to have wide receivers through your flex, another wide receiver for injury, and another wide receiver for bye weeks by round 10. So in a league with 2 wide receiver spots and a flex spot, that's 3 spots total to start wide receivers, plus 2 is 5 through 10 rounds. 4 wide receiver and flex spots would be 6 through 10 rounds, and so on. Now at this point, we have our RB1, we have our wide receivers through the flex. What about your RB2? And the crutch of this draft strategy is on the back of knowing RB2s are the most replaceable position outside of quarterback and tight end. The idea here is you have access to your legendary running back, you have advantages all across the board, and then you're making up ground at RB2 as the season goes on. And as we can see here, this is a great tweet by Jacob Sanderson. I bring it up in almost every video. He showed really well how replaceable back-end RB1 and high-end RB2 production is, where 15 points per game is really easy to find off of waivers, where last year we had Nick Chubb, David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs all average in that 15 point per game area, while Devontae Booker, Darrell Williams, Deonta Foreman, Cordarrelle Patterson, Elijah Mitchell all match that production. We also had other running backs match that production. We had Dearness Johnson weeks. We had Rashad Penny weeks. We had Justin Jackson weeks. Peyton Barber weeks. Rex Burkhead. There was a bunch of running backs where, the starter goes down. We're going to get some usable weeks from this guy. It happens all the time. We saw with Latavius Murray. We saw a couple Devonta Freeman weeks. It happens all the time. It is not as difficult as it seems to get running back production off of waivers, especially that 15 point per game at RB2 that we're looking for. And you're not only piecing together your RB2s off waivers, you also have to bank that you can hit on an RB2 when you're drafting them in round 7, 8, 9, 10. You're going to have a stable of RB2s to rotate between. Hopefully by the time that things matter in the playoffs, you have some kind of RB2 production, whether that's from next year's Elijah Mitchell, Cordarrelle Patterson, or one of those flash-in-the-pan guys like Rashad Penny was down the stretch last year. So now we know how to use Hero RB. Where and when can we use it? And the best part about Hero RB is you can use it in any and all formats. I'm going to get questions down below. Ron, here are my league settings. Can I use it here? Yes. Half PPR, full PPR, standard? Yes. 1 quarterback, super flex? Yes. Doesn't matter how many wide receiver, flex spots, PPR, standard, all that. Hero RB works universally. Now, in terms of when to use Hero RB, and just in terms of the perspective of all the draft strategies we talked about this offseason, we have 0 RB, Hero RB, and double Hero RB. I would say Hero RB is my #1 draft strategy. 0 RB and double Hero RB are kind of like Look, I'm not a baseball guy, but it's my curveball, off speed, and then Hero RB is the old reliable fastball, 100-mile-per-hour heater down the middle, because I believe it is the strongest strategy because it takes elements of zero RB and robust RB and combines their strongest parts, where you're avoiding the dead zone, you're winning the flex, and then you're gaining exposure to irreplaceable production at the running back position. It gives you the best of both worlds. So I'll probably end up in the range of like 8 to 12 redraft managed leagues this year. And if I draft 10, I would say 5 to 7 of them will probably be Hero RB, 2 to 3 of them will be double Hero RB, and then I'd say 1 to 2 of them will be full zero RB. Now, one last thing I want to go over before I show you guys the mocks that I did. Let's talk about the success of Hero RB last year. It's one thing to call it the #1 draft strategy for 2022 or whatever I titled it for this video, but it's another to actually prove how strong it was last year. When we use RotoViz's roster construction tool from last year's Best Ball Mania teams and we filter for RB1 taken in the first 2 rounds, RB2 taken after round 6, and set the minimum to 5 or more running backs, we get bright green across the board. This was an extremely dominant strategy in 2021, and historically, I think it's always just been a really solid strategy. And even at the top end, we saw some of the biggest prizes go to Hero RB teams. Zero RB was also used to take down some of the biggest prizes Underdog has to offer. Dusty 16 won last year's Puppy 2 with a Hero RB start, winning $100,000 in the process. He didn't even really hit on anybody in those first 2 rounds. He went Aaron Jones, I guess is fine. Calvin really busted, but that's how we hammer the wide receivers. He goes Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Mark Andrews, Tyler Boyd, Chase Edmonds. I guess it kind of slows down here, but Russell Gage was all right. Matt Ryan, he got Amon-Ra St. Brown at the end there. Insane. Now, I will also say, if any of you guys out there want to try your hand using Hero RB to try and take down one of these big Underdog best ball tournaments, I'll have a link down below in the description. I'll have a link down below in the comments, and it will take you right to Underdog Fantasy with my promo code RON already put in, and that will match your deposit all the way up to $100. You can get in on the fun on Underdog Fantasy this season. So our first mock is going to be from the 102, and just to put it out there before we get into any picks, these mocks are going to be PPR, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receiver, a tight end, 2 flex, 6 bench. And when we talk about Hero RB, the 101 and the 102 are the perfect spot for it, because you can take your pick of Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey and then skip out on running back until round 7, 8, 9, whenever you please. And we got McCaffrey go at the 101. So at the 102, we go JT, and we come back around to the 211. And very rarely does Mark Andrews make it back to us here. So I decided I'd snag him, knowing that I'd have my pick of T. Higgins or A.J. Brown at this next spot. So we go A.J. Brown at 3. We come to the 4-5 turn, and at this point, we've taken 2 detours already from wide receiver. Again, we want to end up with 6 wide receivers. That's wide receivers through the flex, 4, plus 2, 6 wide receivers by round 10. And we have to choose wisely when we stray from wide receiver in this area. So instead of going away from the position, we're in the dead zone. We know wide receivers are good here. So we're staring down Hollywood Brown, Judy, McLaurin, and Juju. Take whoever you want. Again, this is a strategy video, not here for player takes. So I go with Judy and Marquise Brown. We come back around to the 6-7 turn. Elijah Moore and Kyler Murray are both screaming values to me. We ended up taking both of them. And this is where the pressure point is. We get to round 8-9 turn. We have wide receivers through our flex at this point. These next 3 picks, 2 of them need to be wide receivers. And the question is, do we go Tony Pollard and Sky Moore, or Sky Moore and Chase Claypool, and just hammer running backs the rest of the way? And it really just depends on what you can stomach in that RB2 spot. We decided to go Pollard here. I'm not sure why he's seen as a pure handcuff that you can't start in week 1 in that RB2 spot, and he's not seen more like an A.J. Dillon. We talked about Pollard earlier in the offseason, but he's projected for as many weighted opportunities per game as guys in this range like Ramondre Stevenson and Chase Edmonds. He not only has that floor of touches out of the gate, but he also has insane upside if he was to win the 1A job over Zeke, or if Zeke was to go down. And I'm not sure why we treat A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones like this Kamara Ingram situation while not treating Pollard and Zeke the same way on a high-scoring offense. So I'm completely fine starting Pollard in week 1, and then we come back around in round 9, and we go Sky Moore. It doesn't feel great to pass on Ramondre Stevenson, Kareem Hunt, or Devin Singletary in round 9, but we waited on wide receiver until round 3, so it was a luxury we couldn't really afford. You can't have a Hero RB, an elite tight end, an elite quarterback, and then still have the luxury to double-tap running back in rounds 8 and 9. Now at round 10-11 turn, Technically, this 10th round pick has to be a wide receiver to get us to 6 wide receivers through round 10. But it's important to remember, especially on the turns like this, you don't have to force that rule. That rule, as much as I like to enforce and I like to follow it, it is an arbitrary spot. So if you come to the 10 round spot and you have a player that is a screaming value like Darrell Henderson was to me, I took Darrell Henderson because I was scared that he was going to go at that turn. And then I had a bunch of wide receivers I was fine taking in the 11th round, from George Pickens, Julio Jones. I even would have been fine with maybe even I don't love Golladay, but I still think George Pickens, Julio Jones would be fine there. And at 11, we could technically pass up on Julio or Pickens here, since Fantasy Pros has their value pretty screwed up, where you can kind of just get those guys to fall all the way to like round 13, 14. But in actual drafts, Pickens and Julio Jones are going in that 9th, 10th round area. So we grab him and then we hammer running backs the rest of the way with Isaiah Pacheco. Why not? The rookie sensation on the Chiefs. We go Zamir White and Eno Benjamin. Just a bunch of upside plays that we can filter through, churn and burn on our bench to sort of try and find that RB2 production throughout the season. And when we look at this final team, I would give it a B+, A-. Strong starting lineup. We have JT as our hero RB. We have elite quarterback in Kyler Murray. We have an elite tight end in Mark Andrews. We have wide receiver through the flex +2. A.J. Brown, Marquise Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, all very solid. Sky Moore and George Pickens kind of cycling in there as our rotational flexes is completely fine. And I love the running back 2 spot with Tony Pollard. Darrell Henderson is perfect. Again, elite tight end is perfect. I love this team. If you want to switch out Sky Moore for a Singletary or Miles Sanders because you're more comfortable doing that, I think that also works. This next draft we have is from the middle at the 106 spot, and I think this will be the common setup in a home league where people are going to discount Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and just give you a gift in the mid to late first. Here, we take our 103 at 6th overall in Justin Jefferson, and we come back around in the second round and we crown Saquon Barkley as our hero RB. That's the dream setup for hero RB. If you can go J-Jeff, Kupp, Chase, and then pair that up with Saquon, you're looking really, really good. And then we come around in the 306. T. Higgins falls in our lap. Same thing with Mike Williams at the 407. 506 is the first difficult decision of this draft. We're looking at Jeudy, Marquise Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Darren Waller. We go Darren Waller here as he's the last elite tight end. Elite tight ends are good for structure, and we have the possibility that wide receiver value makes it back to us on the way back around. And at the 607, we're staring down Elijah Moore and Rashad Bateman. We went Elijah Moore in the last draft, decided to go Rashad Bateman here. Now we have wide receivers through the flex filled. Ideally, we want 2 more picks at wide receiver in the next 4 rounds to make sure we get to 6 through round 10. And at the 706, we have Jalen Hurts sitting in our laps. We take Jalen Hurts in the 7th round. Jalen Hurts at any point in that area is absolute money. Now, I wanted to say these 2 first mock drafts would lead you to believe that hero RB would only work with elite quarterback and elite tight end. It's just the way the draft board fell here. Neither of them are mandatory, but one or the other or both are both fine as long as you make sure that you're making up for wide receiver by round 10. Now, the other reason I went Hurts here, I didn't really like the wide receiver value. Maybe I could have gone Treylon Burks. Maybe I could have gone Kadarius Toney, but we come back around to the 807. Kadarius Toney is still there. Too good to pass up on him, so we go Kadarius Toney. 906 comes around. Chase Edmonds falls in our lap. Could have gone Ramondre Stevenson, Devin Singletary, James Cook, all fine targets. And I would say when we're talking about RB2s and hero RB or any of these strategies where we're targeting running backs after the dead zone, I love this round 8 to 10 area where you can get Ramondre Stevenson, Singletary, James Cook, even Clyde Edwards-Helaire will get there, Miles Sanders, Kareem Hunt, any of those guys in that area, I think are all good. I'm calling that this year the green zone running backs, where once you get to that area and the tide turns to the Rondale Moores, Jacoby Myers of the world, even the Tyler Boyds, Chris Olaves of the world, Devontae Parker, Russell Gage, that's when the tide shift and running backs become really good bets to make in that area. Then at the 1007, we need our 6th wide receiver. We go George Pickens again. I think he's a fine pick there. And then we hammer running backs the rest of the way with Darrell Henderson, Jamal Williams, Zamir White, and Dearness Johnson. I would give this team an A or an A+. Across the board, it's solid. Jalen Hurts is great. Darren Waller is great. We have Saquon Barkley, Chase Edmonds, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, Mike Williams, Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney, and George Pickens coming off the bench. Darrell Henderson as our RB3. And then we have Jamal Williams, Zamir White, Dearness Johnson to churn and burn through waiver running backs to try and supplement that RB2 production. So for this last one, we're going to draft out of the 110 spot, but I wanted to change the format for this one. Here we're going to go half PPR and only 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. So 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and only 1 flex spot. This is more traditional, more casual, and I wanted to show how I would use Hero RB in this setup. And at the 1-2 turn, at that 110 spot, we go Jamar Chase. And again, this is going to be a gift that will happen in your home leagues. Yes, it is okay to take a wide receiver in round 1, even in half PPR. Chase is my last elite wide receiver available, and you can kind of play the waiting game where we're at the turn. There's 4 picks between me and my next pick, and I'm fine at the 203 with any of Swift, Saquon, or Najee. Now, I know there's 4 picks there, so, all 3 of them could go, but we gamble a little bit, and it pays off. Swift makes it back to us, which is perfect. Jamar Chase and DeAndre Swift up top is beautiful. Then we come to the 3-4 turn. We're staring down Kyle Pitts, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, ETN, and we go Pitts to get the positional advantage there. With 3 position players I like on the board, and ETN, DJ Moore, and Waddle, we take another gamble on the turn to see if any of them will make it back to us, and they do. So we have ETN or Waddle here. For the sake of maintaining a Hero RB build, we go Waddle, but I think ETN would have been fine here. Now, when we come back to the 5-6 turn, Juju is an extremely easy pick for me there. But the second pick is a bit tougher. We have Michael Thomas on the board. We have Elijah Moore on the board. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown on the board. All of them I have in the same tier. Decided to go Michael Thomas here just to change things up a bit. I haven't gotten him on one of these Fantasy Pros mocks, and I think that he's fine anywhere in the 5th round. So getting him, 603, absolutely fine with me. And then we get to the 7-8 turn. Remember, instead of needing 6 wide receivers through the flex plus 2, so that would be 4 plus 2 is 6, we only need 5 because we only have to start 3 plus 2, 5 through 10 rounds. So we only need 1 more wide receiver here. And we get to the 7-8 turn, and Devontae Smith is such a value here. I scoop him up, and then we're done at wide receiver. Now we're looking at running back. I like any of Ramondre Stevenson, James Cook, Devin Singletary. We go Ramondre Stevenson here, hoping that a Buffalo running back falls back to us. And at the 9-10 turn, he does. We get Devin Singletary, which is absolutely sweet. We now have Singletary and Ramondre Stevenson as our sort of rotational RB2s. And then we get Dak Prescott in the 10th round, who we don't even have any stacks for Dak Prescott, right? We don't have a CeeDee Lamb. We don't have a Gallup. But I think he makes some sense in the 10th round here. Why not? We don't have to burn a roster spot to stream quarterback. We can just have Dak Prescott set and forget it for the entire year. And now we can just hammer out running backs the rest of the draft. So we go Isaiah Spiller, which is a nice rookie upside swing. Same thing with Brian Robinson. And then we get Jerick McKinnon to close it out as one of those pass-catching backs on a good team. Now, when we look at this team, I would give it an A+. We have wide receivers through the flex with Devonta Smith and Michael Thomas coming off the bench. We have Dak and Pitts as elite onesies. We have DeAndre Swift as our Hero RB. We have Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Juju Smith-Schuster in the starting lineup. We even have Ramondre Stevenson and Devin Singletary rotating in as our RB2s. There really isn't a flaw in this roster in my eyes. This is the perfect Hero RB setup if I was going into more of a casual setup where it's only 1 flex and 2 wide receiver spots. Now, that is going to do it for us today. If you want to go out there and draft structurally sound teams to dominate your league mates, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be in the description. It'll be pinned at the top of the comments down below. I have a complete ranking spreadsheet, 200 plus players, where it's set up in a way where I have the elite running backs pushed up. So you'll draft your Hero RB early. And then I have wide receivers pushed up, so you're not taking any of the running backs in the dead zone. And then I have those green zone running backs, so Ramondre Stevenson, Pollard, all of those guys pushed up just a little bit so that you start to target them in that round 8, 9, 10 area. So you're drafting structurally sound teams without even really having to think about it too much. Now, that's all we got for today. This is going to be, I guess, strategy week, where we went over Zero RB earlier. We went over Hero RB today. We have 3 more strategy videos planned. We're going to go over how I'm approaching drafts from each section, so the early, middle, and back end of drafts. And it's going to be less about structure and dead zone running backs and more about those individual draft spots and how I'm attacking those spots in 2022. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure you have post notifications on so you don't miss any of these draft strategy videos when they come out. And if you enjoyed it, make sure you go down below, subscribe, and leave a like. I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice. Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from misdemeanors, dream.